Some stories contain language and content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, and welcome to the 4th episode of Reality Worse Than Nightmares. Thank you for tuning in, and if you enjoy the videos, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. If you have a personal story that you would like to hear, please send it to realityworsethannightmares@gmail.com. Again, that's realityworsethannightmares@gmail.com. Now you can submit a true story about a creepy encounter or a terrifying event that happened to you or someone you know. Or you can submit a short horror fiction story such as a creepypasta style tale. Please specify in your email whether or not the story is truth or fiction. You can also follow me on Twitter if you like at RealNightmares with a Z. There's a spelling in the description if you need it. Now this episode will consist of a story found on the subreddit Let's Not Meet. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. On to the story. That one time a psycho on a train unleashed my ultimate form. In order to really paint the picture for you of the scariest event that I've ever experienced in my life, and to really feel that moment when my blood turned to ice in my veins, I've got to give you a little background on my rather unconventional and fucked up childhood. I'll try to keep this part brief. I'm sure this will sound like utter bullshit to some, but I assure you it's not. I'm telling you the absolute truth, even if it does sound like a badly produced after-school special. My father kidnapped me from my mother when I was a baby. Not because he loved me and couldn't live without me, but because he's a sociopathic douchebag that wanted to hurt my mother as much as he could. I was missing for roughly 6 years. Face on the back of a milk carton, the whole nine. My father was an ex-military survivalist that smuggled drugs over the Mexican-American border, among other things at the time. During these most formative years of my development, I was surrounded by criminals and raised by this neglectful fucktard. I had a lot of severe trauma very young. Let's just say that I knew what real monsters were. By the time I was located and returned to my mother, just after I turned 7, I knew how to load, clean, and assemble several different types of guns. I knew how to aim for the head of the men wearing blue uniforms, and I was a damn good shot with a handgun. I had been left alone for days at a time, repeatedly and often, so I was completely self-sufficient and I could care for myself. I didn't go to school and I had only been around other kids for very rare, brief moments in time. I was a feral little beast at this point. I didn't trust adults, or anyone for that matter. In my experience, most people were liars and didn't show you their true face. Luckily for me, I was returned to a loving home with my mother and stepfather, with love, therapy, and protection by the two of them. I think I turned out to be a relatively normal and surprisingly mentally healthy woman, albeit with a few idiosyncrasies. Now the point of all this preamble is to give you some context regarding the kind of person I am. I'm not a victim. I do not take shit from people, and there are very few things in this world that truly terrify me. I am a motherfucking survivor. Growing up the way I did, I studied people intensely as a defense mechanism. I'm very good at reading people and their emotions, at times even the feelings they won't admit to themselves. I have been left with an obsession for my security and of those I love, so I tend to be hyper-vigilant of my surroundings. There is always a weapon of some type on my person or in my belongings, wherever I go, and I take note of every exit and entrance of any place I step into. As a teenager, my stepfather taught me some tricks on how to take down someone that was bigger and or stronger than me. He was a hell-raising biker and at one time a bartender and a bouncer at a rowdy biker bar, so he knew his stuff. You would think that I would be prepared, right? The story that I'm trying to get to here was one of the few times in my adult life that someone slipped through all my defenses and nearly got to my young daughters. Now it's one thing to fear for your own safety, but to fear for the safety of your children, as I'm sure every parent knows, is something else entirely. It is ice cold, blood-curdling, absolute sheer fucking terror, and I never, ever, ever want to experience it again. I was living in San Francisco roughly 7 years ago. At the time I managed a medical office inside a large residential drug rehab center. The residents were a mix of characters ranging from the homeless and mentally ill to straight out of San Quentin parolees. I actually enjoyed my work and I never felt unsafe there, but it was exhausting. It was Friday at the end of a 50-hour work week, and I could not wait to get home and put my feet up. The building I worked in was donated by the Catholic Church and used to be an old convent. It's a 4-story stone behemoth, and I ran up and down 3 of those floors all day, every day that week. It had been a rough week, and I was deep to the bones tired as well as mentally fried. It was no quick commute home for me, however. My job was in the Fillmore Lower Height District, and my babysitter lived near Balboa Park, while I lived in the Sunset District next to San Francisco State. The fastest way home involved walking 2 city blocks to get to a bus which dropped me near the closest underground station. From there I'd hop onto a train that would take me all the way across the city, nearly to the end of the line. At least the babysitter didn't live too far from the line, so I didn't need to transfer to another bus. Once I had my girls, I would have to wait outside for the next train and head back down the M line, and finally a 15 to 20-minute trek on foot to the back of the small city-sized complex where our apartment was. I had made it to the babysitter's house uneventfully and stood waiting for the next train, counting the minutes down until we would be at our front door. This was an above-ground stop, so my habit was to hold the hand of my 7-year-old and heft my 3-year-old toddler on my hip, clamber up the stairs, and carry her through the train to find a seat. Although she was able to walk, she wasn't so balanced in a moving subway train, as well as being a toddler, so she tended to fall over and become easily distracted by the other people on the train. Strollers seem to be more of a pain in the arse than they are helpful in dealing with public transit, so this had become my routine. Looking back, I'm sure I looked like an easy target. It's not like I present this badass, hardened, grizzled person appearance. There's nothing really intimidating about me, I don't think. I knew I had balls of steel, but unless you challenged me, no one else would. I was a 27-year-old exhausted single mother just trying to get home with my kids and belongings in tow. We were on the final leg of the journey home, and being so tired and wiped out, my defenses were down. So when I managed to get up the stairs onto the train and realized that the car was empty except for one homeless man, I just didn't feel it was worth it to continue through the train cars to a more populated one. I observed this guy and quickly took mental note of him, as was my habit. He was at the end of the train in the last car, right next to and opposite the door I entered from. He didn't look to be something that I should be afraid of. Remember, I worked with this population every day, and I knew that most of these people are nothing to be scared of. Most of these guys just had a shitty life followed by a series of bad decisions and/or an inability to learn from their own mistakes. In fact, when I was traveling on my own, it was a habit of mine to sit down in the empty seat next to a homeless person that no one else would take and strike up a conversation. If you ever want to see true joy in the eyes of another human, sit down next to a homeless person and talk to them like a regular person. You'll make their day. But I digress. He appeared to be in his mid-40s, unkempt, shaggy dark hair and scruffy facial hair, wearing several layers of raggedy stained clothes with an oversized coat that hung past his knees. He had a tall can of beer in his hand, I noticed, but didn't seem overly attentive to my presence. Even though this man didn't set off a fear response for me, I was not in the mood to deal with an intoxicated hobo with my girls that night. So I headed up the train, hoping that I'd make it to the next car before we started moving. No such luck. Being the only group that got on the train at this stop, the train pulled off quickly, and I had only made it near the end of this car. Balancing a tot on one hip, holding the hand of the other, and all the way to the bags and purses on the other shoulder, I just kind of dropped and wilted into the empty seats that were next to us at the front of the car. We didn't have too far to go now, and I could see from our vantage point 2 people in the car ahead of me. I was in the habit of placing my girls on the seat to situate the bags, and I always sat in the aisle as a protective measure. While we're getting settled and the train gets going, I hear this guy in the back start singing to himself. Honestly, I don't remember what, I just remember he seems happy. I filed this man away in my brain as just another homeless guy riding on the train at night on a loop to stay warm, which they did often. Most of the time they don't bother anyone because they don't want to get kicked off the train. I figured he had panhandled enough that night for a beer and a ticket, and I didn't want to begrudge him a little joy and warmth as long as he stayed away from my kids. As I'm sitting there attending to my girls, kind of half aware of the hobo in the back, I slowly register that his singing is getting a little closer, a little louder, and more boisterous. I glance over my shoulder to see that he's hobbling in our direction, and looking at my toddler, who is peeking over the back of the seat now as she's sitting on her knees. I start to pay a little more attention to his whereabouts, but again, There's nothing that says to me he's dangerous. I have no problem enforcing boundaries with strangers in public, but I also have a lot of compassion for these guys. After all, with a couple different turns in my own past, that could have been me. It's apparent this guy has had more than one toll boy that night, and he's sort of swaying and slurring his words, but he appears to be singing for my little tot because she's tickled pink, giggling and smiling the more animated his singing becomes. I study his face, but his smile doesn't seem creepy to me at all. He honestly doesn't seem like a possible Chester to me or have any ill intent. He just seems to enjoy entertaining an adorable little girl. Maybe he has kids of his own somewhere that he missed, or maybe he was just lonely. Even so, I didn't want to engage this guy and encourage him, so I was paying a little more attention to what he was doing now out of my peripheral view. By this time he had made it pretty close to us, and he dropped into a bench seat that was a couple rows opposite us, roughly 7 feet away. We were sitting in the forward-facing seats at the front of the car. Now, I was wary, but still not afraid or skeeved out by this guy. He starts chatting at me at this point. In his slurred speech, he says,
Beautiful family you got there. You're a lucky mom to have such cute kids.
I'm so not in the mood to talk to anyone right now, but as I said, I have too much compassion for these people that are down on their luck, so I politely said,
Thank you,
without turning around. Still slurring, he launches into a tale about the family he used to have, and everything that went wrong in his life. It doesn't seem to matter to him that I'm not really engaging, but he's not coming any closer to us, so I don't stop him or interrupt. Now what happens next is my first inkling that this guy may not be what he seems. It's not so much what he says that does it, but it's the sudden shift in the tone and personality. He's not slurring anymore, and the volume of his voice has dropped a bit, and the tone of his voice changes to this Hannibal Lecter smugness. He's not talking to me anymore, but at my tot who is peeking at him over my shoulder. Hello, little girl. Now this guy had my full attention. Every cell in my body is saying pay attention to this hello, Clarice, motherfucker. I look over my shoulder to look directly at him and really assess his demeanor. His joviality seemed to be gone, and I don't see a happy hobo anymore, but a leering grin on his face that doesn't reach his dead-looking brown eyes. He's looking at my littlest tot, but then shifts his eyes to my 7-year-old, who was also staring at him, although looking less entertained than her sister. This is the moment my blood runs cold. In that same Hannibal tone of voice, still not slurring, he says, Aren't you the pretty one? Such pretty white skin, so sexy. I'm looking directly at him when he says this, and what I see in his face has me fucking terrified. I do not like the way he's looking at my daughter like she's a piece of meat. He realizes that I'm looking at him and shifts his eyes to look at me now, and grins a little wider to show me a perfectly white, intact smile that seems incongruous with the rest of his getup. I also notice that while his attire is dirty, he himself seems pretty clean, and his scruffy facial hair has a distinct line as if he shaved it that way on purpose. Now maybe I'm just paranoid due to my past. Maybe this guy's gotten free dental work. Maybe he had showered at a shelter but had nothing clean to put back on. Maybe he'd gotten a free shave from a barber giving back. There are plenty of plausible explanations for what I observe. But it's when I lock eyes with this guy that alarm bells start going off in my head. What kind of a man calls a 7-year-old sexy? And why did his demeanor change so suddenly? Why did he seem perfectly sober? I have absolutely no doubt this man is a predator. My intuition, which I trust completely, says to get the hell away from this guy now. All of this goes through my head in nanoseconds. I stand up to pick up my bags, adrenaline surging, heft the little one back on my hip, and grab the hand of my oldest and head for the door of the car, because I want the 2 people in the car ahead of me to hear. I wait for the doors to open before I turn back to him and say loudly with mama bear authority,
You stay away from us.
I didn't care if I was wrong in my assumption. I didn't care if I hurt his feelings. I lumber to the front of this car and again sit in the very front forward seats. I don't go any further because this happens to be a long train with probably 6 or 7 cars, and I don't see anybody on the next couple of cars from my vantage point. I want to stay with the other passengers. It's not unusual for the train to be this empty, this far away from town at this time of night between the commute rush and the Friday night club crowd. I'm used to disembarking alone or with very few others at my stop when I work this late. I'm starting to panic at this point about what I would do at my stop coming up. It is also on the part of the line that's still above ground, and I'm not going to have a crowd of people to get lost in. This creep could easily follow me on my walk through the complex and either attack me alone or follow me home. Because I'm pondering my predicament and am literally terrified, I don't immediately register that the people who were on the car with me have gotten off the train and now I'm alone again. Several minutes goes by and we're getting close to our stop when I hear the whoosh of the car doors open behind me.
Please be another passenger.
I'm praying to myself before I look behind me. Nope. It's creepy Hannibal Hobo heading towards me again, but this time he's glaring at me. No more smile, no more singing, no more slurring, just an evil glare as he plods my direction. He's got his left hand up on the overhead bar with his right hand seeming to hold something inside his jacket as he plods towards me. My stomach drops into my toes and my heart leaps into my throat. We're all alone, several cars behind anyone I can see. I don't wait to find out what he's got in his jacket. I hadn't set any bags down at this time. They were still over my shoulder and I was still holding my youngest. So I grab the hand of my oldest and tell her we need to get to the front. I could tell she's scared now too, but I'm trying not to frighten her too bad. I kind of push and pull her gently in front of me, thinking if I can get to the front car, even if it's empty, I'll be right behind the conductor. I'm going as fast as I can, which isn't very fast with everything I'm juggling. As I'm nearing the doors again, I could see that the next car is empty, but the next car has people. I'm almost there as long as he doesn't catch up to us. We should be safe again. We're now almost to my stop and the train is slowing down. I hear the doors swoosh open again behind me. I glance over my shoulder to see this guy is fucking running at me. Jesus H. Christ, I have never been so fucking terrified in my entire life. I move ahead as fast as I can to the next car, but I know I'm not going to make it to the next filled with people. And no one seems to be looking this way from the car ahead as the train is pulling into the stop. This is that moment when time just seems to slow down. I'm thinking this guy plans to incapacitate me with no hands to defend myself, and he's going to run off the stopping train with one or both of my girls. Now my adrenaline is surging and I can feel my heart thumping at warp speed. I drop the bags from my shoulder, not giving one fuck about what's in them now. I need free movement. I tell my 7-year-old to stay behind me as I squat down to plop my youngest on the train floor. In one motion I turn around, raise up, pull my pocket knife out of my back pocket and flip it open, taking a wide-legged defensive stance. I don't know if it was the security of my knife in my hand or that one final surge of adrenaline, but I swear to God, as I stood up, I grew. I felt like Mario having just gotten his mushroom. I felt invincible, 3 times my size and superhuman. No one was going to get through to my babies, even if I was going to get stabbed. He stops dead in his tracks when he sees the knife about 5 feet in front of me. I sway a bit with the brake of the train, bringing it to a halt, but keep my footing. Without thinking, I scream at this guy.
Take one more fucking step and I will cut off your balls and fucking choke you out with them.
I see his eyes widen at this. He obviously didn't expect this kind of reaction. He looks in my eyes, looks at the knife, looks behind me at my kids, and one more time glances back into my eyes. Then he turns tail and runs out the open doors and off the train. I barely register a couple college students by the look of them hop onto my car and immediately hop off. Probably because I'm still standing there looking like a psycho with a knife out. I hear the ding and swoosh of the doors closing again and the train moves on. At this point I just kind of crumpled onto the floor and hugged my kids to me and burst into tears. My oldest is crying too, while her little sister is looking completely bewildered. I didn't move from the floor until we pulled up to the next stop at West Portal, where we disembarked and I called my roommate and best friend. He was a man with big biceps and uncanny strength for his size. I wanted him to meet me at the train stop so we didn't have to walk through the complex alone after dark in this craziness, which of course he did because he's amazing like that. I never stayed on an empty train after that. No matter how tired I am, I will move to a car full of people. I never saw Hannibal Hobo again, either, and I don't care to. I don't think he ever wants to see me again, either. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And don't forget to click the info tab in the top right corner of the video if you want to hear more. Have a great night, and remember, it's always darker when you open your eyes.